So let me say this to both of you guys, and it's kind of a segue, but it's also almost an apology in a sense because I like your guys' content a lot online, and it's a funny thing, and I'm sure you guys know this probably better than most people just by the nature of how much you guys know about making content and the back end of it and what that looks like for people. Um, when Brent and I were watching your guys' content, I don't know, it's been like over a year now, I think. We were like, man, like the video and everything is so crisp and like, and all of the editing processes and everything was just amazing. It was on point. But I honestly didn't even really give you guys the proper credit in my head as like, yeah, that shit's not easy. You didn't just like get up one day and like, oh, let's make videos, you know? So it is kind of refreshing to hear that it's really, like you said, it's kind of that simple formula of just keep working your ass off, keep trying things until you find what you like and pick up the skill sets along the way that carry forward onto the next thing as you slowly kind of hone in toward what you're really looking for.
Your passion or your whatever. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you would have met me a few years ago, people would have told you, "Oh yeah, that's Matt, the videographer, editor. You know, he's pretty sharp. You know, he's got great ideas and stuff when he's around." But now I don't think they would. A lot of people don't really know that about me. That my bearings were in being behind the scenes, and what I did is I used that editing capability, and I had created this marketplace, right? So I was working with all these different influencers, and they just send me their footage. All these vlogs, right? They start out as raw, big files that have to get the best moments pulled out of them. Yeah. So I worked with, a hemp company who's now one of my best friends. I worked with, outsourced stuff for Gary Vee and Ryan Serhant and all these huge channels that most Jake Paul, JR Garage, people that mostly everyone would know or seen a video of. I got to get a good glimpse into, hey, this is the way that the pacing works for our videos. This is the audio design we do. This is how we do the thumbnails, and got to do that across a lot of different industries. And so really, where we kind of seem lucky in some ways on YouTube and these different social channels, it's really more formulaic than that. And it's kind of, like I had said earlier, the culmination of a lot of different ingredients just being applied to a new problem and a new opportunity. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of how some of this came to be.
Who would you guys say are some of your guys' biggest motivators? And I know that you kind of came from two different backgrounds.
And they don't have to be in the dog training industry. Just like mentors, whether in person or mentors.
Yeah, I guess just before you answer,
virtual.
This is kind of what I meant, I guess, by the question, because it doesn't have to be a dog trainer necessarily. So here at the Dog Trainers Podcast, when we are having these conversations with other dog trainers, we always try to take a look and think, what is it that's unique? Like what is that special thing that you guys do that no one else in the world does like you? And I think that there's a certain flavor to everything. The website is freaking on point. Like the video content, the Instagram content, all that good stuff. Your guys' podcast is really good. We heard that one too. I was listening to, I think I went back and listened to maybe 9 or 10 of the episodes, and I was looking for like the longer episodes. And I do kind of feel through all of it, through all the different medias, I do kind of feel the I don't want to say attempt because it worked, of just seeming authentic, seeming like I hear you guys talking in the podcast, and then I'll read some some blurbs on the website, and I'm like, oh, that sounds as if it was the person who was speaking right now who was writing that out. Same thing with the content. None of it seems like, I mean, we're all dog trainers here. I'm sure, we all can watch content that's like, I agree with what you're saying or doing right now, but the person doesn't quite have that like presence on camera. They're just kind of stiff and stoic. And
my favorite episode, I really loved the sympathy versus empathy episode. Like we've quoted that in one of the episodes of the podcast.
Oh, really?
That was
that was a darn good.
The podcast was interesting because it pivoted from like, all right, we're going to produce this at the highest level, and that's a lot of it too, right? Like there's so much strategy that goes into what Natalie and I have done. We just recently did this 5-day dog reset boot camp that we was actually the culmination of about 8 months, I'd say, worth of work. So there's just so much beyond the surface. And so with like something like the podcast and specifically in regard to the marketing, right? We've created these different pockets, this digital real estate, if you will, between these properties that we have, right? Instagram's a property, Facebook's a property, our web traffic's a property, our podcast traffic's a property. And, we've, with each of these different channels, we have to determine, how do we differentiate this content so that so it's catered towards the audience that's listening there. And so with our podcast, you'll notice there was a transition. There was a point where it went from a show, something that felt like a podcast, to more of like Natalie's little whispers, and that was very intentional, to make people feel like they that the audio
draws people in. It draws them in.
Yeah. So the podcast listeners felt like they had this different connection than what they had just seen on Instagram. And so there was also there's these two levers that we're pushing and pulling on, which is how do we balance out Natalie's time? If she's the talent in the situation, it's balancing the limited amount of time she has with how do we maximize the amount of output that we can create. And that's something I learned a lot from working with Gary and some of the people on his team, right? Is how do you maximize the output of your content without constraining yourself or becoming your own bottleneck.
Right.
And so that was why we shifted the podcast, is that the podcast just became this, very unedited, literally with a Zoom recorder, in my office, basically her just talking into it and then me uploading it directly with zero editing whatsoever, which consolidated time and then ended up that people liked it more. So
yeah, definitely. Well, that is an interesting approach because it's kind of like a peek behind the scenes. So that's cool to know. So sorry, so just to kind of get back to the original question, doesn't have to be necessarily dog trainers or in the dog training field. Who would you guys say are some of your big inspirations, some of your motivators, some of your mentors?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest inspirations from a brand standpoint is Bigger Pockets. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bigger Pockets. They're in the real estate space, but very similar story to ours, in which they and I don't want to deter too much from the question, but I would love to give some context, because it's kind of a way that we think when we're coming about, how we're going to build our business, right? We know that we're new in the training game. We don't try to pretend that we're these veterans that have been around for decades and decades training, right? But we know where our strengths are, which is in telling that story and communicating it and distributing it online. And so, I say that to say that we're really big on building trust with our core audience, and our core audience is the passionate dog owner. We cater to people that want to know the why behind the how when it comes to dog training. And, that's why we create the content and the brand messaging that we do. But at the same token, Bigger Pockets did something very cool in the real estate space, where they created these digital properties, they built a community, and then they created abilities to monetize outside of that didn't require their time. So they started publishing books, self-publishing books, creating paywalls for certain types of content, creating courses, things. And now what happens is that they have a whole enterprise to which now anyone can plug into that. Anyone in the real estate community can plug into that and add value, gain value. And it's almost like its own exchange. And so for us, we felt like there was an opportunity in the dog training space. When I saw Natalie initially getting really into this and starting to expand her knowledge outwards, she's buying courses online. We're getting DVDs in the mail in the year 2019, 2020. So for me, as a marketer, as someone that had worked with some of the biggest names online, I'm like, whoa, that means that there's an opportunity here that no one's tapping into. And so that's kind of why Bigger Pockets is a huge inspiration for us, is because it started out as a guy that had just gotten really, really into real estate and created this entire enterprise out of his house, just from having a passion to help people gain education around something that was somewhat ambiguous and complicated. And you had to do all these real estate tests and, just really exposed all these different aspects of real estate to people, to the common person at home that, was just sitting around wondering what they were meant to do. And now he's inspired, I'd say millions and millions of people around the world to invest in homes and do all kinds of stuff in real estate. So that entire company and brand is a big inspiration for us at Canine Performance.
That's all. It's like making it more reachable, right? Like dog training is digestible. It's something that is possible. You don't have to, be some, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and our ethos really is that training is a journey, right? And so, for us, that's why we try to make it very, we try to make good content, but at the same time, we try to also make sure that it feels really relatable and that we don't try to put ourselves on too much of a pedestal, because like everyone messes up. You could be the best in the world. And I've, even when I was at PSA Nationals a few months ago, the best in the world mess up, they mess up. And I think when you're able to communicate that to your audience, it really humanizes people that start to grow these audience that, other people are looking onto for inspiration and motivation. So.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I think, I don't know if you guys remember, I think a year ago we reached out to you guys.
I vaguely did, and I feel like I feel like this looks familiar, but the logo is different, and like this thing might be different, or
Well, the reason I bring that up is the last year, no one knows how a podcast is going to turn out, right? You just keep trucking along, and it's cool to have a partner, right? Like Mariano's my partner in the podcast, where we keep each other accountable. We call each other at like 12 o'clock in the morning, and we're like, hey, dude, I got this idea for this podcast. What do you want to do? And there's kind of like this riff back and forth where it's like, it's easier to stay on task. It's easier to stay motivated. It's easier when you have this partner who is there kind of pushing you. And sometimes when he gets lax, I push him. And when I'm lax, he pushes me. And at the end of the day, this is just one of the funnest things to do is the creation of content, right? And saying it in your way and saying it a way that you feel might touch the people who might be your ideal audience, right? So it's a really fun process. We've had the opportunity of talking to some really great dog trainers, Michael Ellis, Sean O'Shea, Tyler Muto. We have hopefully Jeff coming soon. Tommy Davis. Oh, Tom is. I can't wait to grab a beer with that dude. But we've had and everyone talks about kind of falling in love with the process, right? And it's interesting because you guys come from a fitness background where it's all about process. Right. It's like you work months to just be able to have like a lump, what I mean? Or to have like another lump on your back or whatever it is. And it's like, I want to kind of talk a little bit about like, I'm sure it has, but I just want to kind of talk about it. Like the discipline of fitness, how has it really contributed to your guys' overall success, your process, your strategy? Talk to us a little bit about that if you guys can.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll keep this one short and then let Natalie hop back on the mic. But, fitness for me, it's where my bearings were, right? So a lot of like my teenage years moving into adulthood, I learned lessons in the gym. And one of the biggest things I learned from fitness and from coaching people and from working with other coaches in the fitness space is that your program is only as good as your client can adhere to it. Not everyone wants to be a bodybuilder, right? Not everyone wants to be an elite power lifter. And if you, as a coach or a trainer, try to give information to your client that is not in line with their goals, you're going to take an L because they're never going to be inspired to go do that. And so for us, fitness taught us a lot of lessons, both in how to grow, right? In the sense that you don't make big jumps, right? You make incremental jumps. And when you're on track to where you're supposed to go and you can measure that, through your progress and having systems and frameworks for how you go about doing what it is that you're trying to accomplish, everything becomes more measurable. And so it allows you to, by design, minimize your risk and really optimize your progress over time. And so that's fitness, I would say for me personally, has carried over not only into how I operate my businesses, but also just, in the sense of dog training as well. I think there's so many lessons that are parallel between how you make progress with your body and how you make progress with training a dog, right? It really is through these gradual incremental adjustments until ultimately you're on a very optimized path where, you can measure your growth and your progress and you can see that change, which inherently motivates us to then want to kind of pursue it deeper and deeper. So that's my answer, at least.
That's a great one.
Yeah. And you know what, I think that Matt really summed that up really well. I would have the same, just kind of thought about that. And, as the dog trainer for the business, there are so many parallels of just like, not every single day are you going to have that motivation and that drive to go to the gym. Like it's something of like, you have to make that choice. You have to put on the outfit. If you take pre-workout, you got to take the pre-workout. You got to go to the gym. You got to walk into the gym. You have to know what it is that you are doing. It is something that like, you have to show up. You just have to. And like, you kind of have to have a plan moving forward. And when it comes to fitness, it's just one of those things where it's like, your results are only going to be as well as the discipline that you have, because it's just like when motivation fails, discipline is all that you have, but also the knowledge that you have too, because I've been working out since I was a freshman in college, and there's a lot of things that I did really, really incorrectly. And if I was doing the things that I learned when I met Matt and he taught me, I would have been in much better shape. I would have been so much healthier, so much faster. And it's just because even though I was doing some of the different things, my progress was only as limited to my understanding of those things. And so when I think about dog training, I'm like, okay, I always want to be learning more. I want to have a deeper understanding. And even just basic things like how you handle a leash. So much communication goes through the leash of just like your technique. And you can be doing bicep curls all day, but if you're swinging that dumbbell around, you're not really going to be making the correct progress. You're not going to be activating the right muscles. And that's the same thing. You could be communicating something totally incorrect to the dog. You may be, getting rid of that negative reinforcement when you still need it. And the release of that pressure teaches the dog that, oh, wait, the behavior was done. It's like, no, I still needed you to follow through with that behavior. So, all of those different things, I think about that a lot when it comes to fitness and relating that. And it's just really awesome because I think that a lot of people understand health and fitness a lot more. So it's nice to be able to like draw those parallels, because that's a little bit more easier for a lot of people to understand. And dog training can be like really hard to grasp. So having those, similarities has been really helpful. Hopefully that makes sense.